G'day! Hello and welcome! So this was the battle to decide not only the fate of the Hellenic world, but of European culture in general. This battle pinned the outnumbered and desperate Hellenes against the numerically superior Achaemenid Persian Empire. This battle changed the course of history and was the Greek final stand. This was the Battle of Salamis. In 499 BCE, the Ionian Greeks that had been under Persian rule ever since the Persian conquest of Lydia back in 547 BCE revolted against their Persian Empire. The Ionians sought assistance from the mainland polis. At first, they asked Sparta, but when they refused, they secured assistance from both Athens and Eretria. After the Ionians were defeated, the Persians sacked Eretria. However, they were defeated by the Athenians at Marathon. This caused Darius, king of the Persians, to swear vengeance against the Athenians. However, he never got his chance. He died in 486 BCE, leaving his son and heir Xerxes to enact that revenge. After the Battle of Marathon, the Athenians knew the Persians may return. They also knew they may need to stand alone, given Sparta's reluctance to fight outside the Peloponnese. So, they debated what they should do. In 483 BCE, a rich vein of silver was found in the Lavion mines of Attica, the region controlled by the Athenians. Themistocles successfully argued that this silver should be used to build a large naval fleet in order to defend Athens against not only their rivals of the island of Aegina, but also against the Persians. In 480, Xerxes invaded Greece via Macedon and Thrace, and with his victories at Thermopylae, the draw at Artemisium, and the Thebes Medizing, the road to Athens laid open via Boeotia. With the Athenian polis in panic, the young democracy sent a delegation to the Oracle of Delphi, where according to Herodotus, they got this response.
Why sit you, doomed one? Fly to the ends of the earth. All is ruin for fire, and headlong god of war shall bring you low.
Obviously, this was not well received in Athens. So, they sent a second envoy, and they received this response.
Though all else shall be taken, Zeus, the all-seeing, grants that the wooden wall shall not fall.
An argument ensued as to the meaning of this prophecy. Some thought that they were referring to the bushes that grew around the Acropolis. However, Themistocles successfully argued that it referred to the wooden ships of the new Athenian fleet. So, knowing that they couldn't defend Athens on land, they abandoned the city. Xerxes would then fulfill his father's wish for vengeance. And in September of 480 BCE, he sacked Athens, destroyed her temples, and set the city alight. The main Greek fleet had fallen back to the strait between the port of Piraeus and the island of Salamis. Here, the Greeks could see the smoke from Athens burning. The fleet commander, Eurybites of Sparta, favoured moving the fleet to the Isthmus of Corinth. Here, the Peloponnesians had built a wall in defence of their area of Greece. Themistocles argued that the fleet should remain and fight at Salamis, arguing the Persians could supply their armies, no matter how many walls the Peloponnesians built. Themistocles was concerned that despite Sparta's lack of naval experience, the Council of 17 commanders, built from the various polis that supplied ships, would side with Eurybates. So Themistocles sent the slave Sicinus to try and trick Xerxes into thinking that the fleet would actually move to the Isthmus of Corinth. Having defeated the Greeks at Thermopylae and sacking Athens, Xerxes was confident of victory. He was also confident that his 1,200 odd ships would easily crush the Greeks' 370. However, these numbers might be exaggerated by Herodotus, as Poseidon had earlier sent a storm to destroy parts of the Persian fleet. When Sicinus found Xerxes, he had set up his throne at Mount Aegilius so that he could overlook the battle. Xerxes believed Sicinus and sent his fleet to block the western outlet to the strait. Artemisia, queen of Halicarnassus, tried to warn Xerxes that the strait would be deadly for Persia's large ships, and in fact it favoured the Greeks' smaller triremes. However, Mardonius, chief advisor to Xerxes, pushed for an attack. That night, Persian ships searched the waters for the Greek ships that Xerxes thought were retreating. In fact, Themistocles had been advised his plan had worked, and he convinced the fleet to remain. So that night, the Greeks rested, ready for the next day's battle. The next morning, the exhausted Persian ships entered the strait. As the Persians approached the Greek lines, the Corinthian ships retreated back, pulling the Persians deeper and deeper into the strait. Once the Persians had been drawn enough in, the Greeks sprung into action and smashed into the Persian ships using their large bronze rams at the head of the triremes. As at Artemisium, the Persians found that their less maneuverable ships were making them vulnerable, and they began to be outflanked. The Persians attempted to turn and flee, but Poseidon was favouring the Greeks, and he blew a strong wind that forced the Persians to stay. The strait was now jam-packed of trapped Persian ships, and the Greeks were smashing into them. Something of a land battle started to occur over the decks of the trapped ships. Difference is the Greeks have fully armoured hoplites versus the Persians, lightly armoured marines. Aramedes, admiral to the Persians, rammed into Themistocles' ship, only to be cut down by a Greek soldier. As wave after wave of Persian ships were destroyed or disabled, Artemisia switched sides and attempted to flee, but her ship was sunk. Xerxes would later remark that she was the only one of his generals to show bravery. The Athenians had sent a small group of ships to recapture the island of Stalia and slaughter the Persian immortals that had sought refuge there. Persian casualties were made worse, as most could not swim, and those that made it ashore were hunted and killed by the Greeks. Xerxes could only watch in horror as his once proud fleet was decimated by the Greeks. Xerxes considered his defeat at Salamis and knew he could not risk his forces by invading the Peloponnese. He had already fulfilled his father's oath of vengeance by burning Athens. And to him, Greece was just a tiny speck at the corner of his vast empire. So Xerxes and most of his army left Greece via the Hellespont. He left Mardonius and a small force to control areas of occupied Greece. However, this force was defeated at Mycale and Plataea in 479 BCE. The Battle of Salamis was a turning point in the Greco-Persian War. It was more than that. It secured the Greek legacy and ensured the emergence of Western civilization. Today, you can visit the island of Salamis, see the monument that was built in honor of the battle, look over the strait where a few brave Greeks stood against many Persians and secured Western culture. Thank you. Ka kite.
Though all else shall be taken, Zeus, the all-seeing, grants that the wooden wall shall not fall.